platform kicks so much ass. This Life in Tech, episode 138. I'm Jason.
And I'm back in Gotham.
And I'm still DK.
So, like, we were just talking about what we wanted to talk about, and then it dawned on me, are we actually ever going to get to it? Because Dan's been gone for like 3 weeks. And the level of pent-up sarcasm.
Danness.
I know nothing of what you all speak of. What's worse, that it happens or that you know it's going to happen and you still have to entertain it?
It's all part of your boy's farm.
You know, you feel fortunate, man, that we actually think about you and talk about you when you're not present.
And not in a bad way.
You, and so do millions of others.
Oh, man. So you guys were asking me earlier about my shirt and tie and sport coat situation. So just so you know, I have fully slipped into the smart casual. So I'm in my jeans every day, very comfortable. And slowly but surely I've been putting the Converse back on because they are way more comfortable for me. And man, I'm in. They don't even recognize me as being different.
From the rest of the faculty?
Yep.
They're not.
Because you can see it like campus wide. Everybody started to like slowly ratchet it down.
They're not looking.
And they're not using their ears.
But so not to get off on too much of a tangent, but when you say that is class in like leadership theory. That's classic about how you keep maintaining standards, because everybody shows up the first day, the first month, that kind of thing. And over time, people start taking liberties with where the rules are, right? Mm-hmm. I think, like we've always said, hey, don't touch kids, don't kill people, those kind of things. There are gray areas in every rule. And how much as a leader do you let it slide before it starts to adversely affect the group, right? And that's where you go from, hey, we can be pretty chill about something. All of a sudden, it's right back to, haircuts and starch shirts and stuff like that, right? But I think that's an interesting thing to watch over time in any organization. Because if you don't do anything about it, people are going to keep creeping until they get to their most comfortable or their centered life, so to speak, which is sometimes consistent with what goes on in the organization or that tribe.
Well, so check this out. This is like insight into how I'm structuring my experiment for the next, at this point, 14 weeks left. So what you have to know up front is the department chair is a West Point grad and wasn't a West Point instructor. Okay? Beautiful human being. I love him. He's a great leader. Really like working with him, but he's by the book, right? Because he's corporate side, if you follow me.
Yep.
And so this way, it's this way, and it's always that way, and that's the way it is. Okay? And I understand that.
Cool.
And so I'm playing the game. I'm part of the unit. I got my, Fridays are purple shirt Fridays because our color is purple. And you got to drink that purple Kool-Aid, son. And so I got my purple shirt on, my purple tie, dark blue blazer, so forth and so on. Well, there's also one other new guy in the department.
You should go with the gray blazer on that one, by the way, but that's fine.
No. This looks tight, dude. Trust me. I tried on some gray ones and not for this complexion, man. I need the blue with the light colors. Anyway. And so
I'm a spring.
I'm done.
It's too much already, dude. We're like 3.4 minutes in.
TK's wanting to talk. He's got like 500 pairs of shoes. When we were back at Silent Circle, he had a whole closet full of shoes at his place. And he goes, "Oh, you should think about my place back at the beach. I've got twice as many."
Yeah. But I didn't sit around talking about it. I did it.
And so the other new guy is like looking at me to see what I do. You can see like the hierarchy and the pecking order is already getting established. And I'm just doing my thing, but fitting in. And so now I'm starting to ratchet down a little bit because now I got my Converse back on 2 days out of the week instead of just one. And I'm going to see how the people around me start to react to that change. That's where I'm at.
In my high school, a couple of years ago, they brought in a new principal that had retired Marine Colonel, right? And you guys know my kid's in the Catholic system, so he got out, got his education PhD, and was at other Catholic schools and showed up. I was there early morning playing basketball with my daughter one time, and he watched him walk around. He every morning would walk around, and even if there was like a little ball of lint on the ground, he would pick it up and put it away. Make sure the doors were closed. And for me personally, encouraging if you're going to work to that level of detail, then the kids are going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
He lasted about a year because my opinion is the previous principal was an empty suit, complete waste of air. Been there for 30 years. And I would say, probably 25 years ago, he was badass and he was doing it. But over time, he had just grown into, some level of apathy with a lot of things. And the teachers were running amok. They could do whatever they wanted. And I thought it was funny that the minute he showed up, there were like 3 or 4 teachers just left. Right. And a year later, he did some very good things from a accountability standpoint that fundamentally changed a lot of things that were going on at the school. And then there was effectively a revolt as far as I can tell, because the school's very lipped on what went on. And boom, we had a new principal right after that. So I think, especially in something as insular as a school where, there's a finite group of people, most of them have been there. Unlike the public teachers move around and there's a little bit more mobility. A lot of these teachers have been here for a long time and they're great teachers and the kids love them and they're great educators. But all of a sudden it's like the we fear change mentality showed up and this cat took over and he was serious about, hey, we're going to lead by example. We're going to work. We're going to make the kids work hard.
Right. So we'll see, man. I got to finish this real quick too, because I understand the next tier up, the dean, is a straight Aussie, and I mean in the strictest sense. Like if you imagine what a dictionary definition of an Aussie would be like, this dude is it. And I love him to death, right? But he's the polar opposite of the chair because he refuses to wear a tie if he doesn't have to. We all have little name tags, which are super nice because they're magnetic instead of pin, so they don't ruin your clothes. And so like the chair always has his on, always. But the dean refuses to put it on.
Right.
And it's like this little thing. And so you can see the hierarchy developing of, okay, do I identify with my immediate social group, which is the department, or do I really decide to not play the game, which I've personally done most of my life, and then I identify with the dean, but not my chair? Hey, man. It's all a social experiment. You got to see what works best to achieve your goals, right?
Well, it's like that with everything.
Yeah.
You got to do what you have to do in order to get what you want.
That's right.
As I tell my younger folks or the kids, it's you got to do the things you have to do so you can do the things you want to do.
Yeah, well, I think it was actually Bonnie. Bonnie's in our live chat right now, our super fan on Twitter. I think she said the quote, or one of us did a few months ago. If I have to wear a tie to get you to listen to me, then is that really a big deal? Dude, I don't think so.
No. I'll tell you, so you guys know, a friend of mine used to be the Secretary of the Interior, right? And when he took over, he was wearing a tie every day. And all of a sudden, some of his subordinates started over time to stop wearing ties. And then they would walk into the office without their jackets on and everything like that. And finally, he just, not wanting to be, super, super crazy about it, he had a tie and a jacket on all the time. And a lot of it for him was, hey, it's respect for the office. Right. And I think it's in general, when you start talking about the executive level in the federal government, we don't have to respect the man, we have to respect the office. Right. I think that's that statement. Right. But he finally said to all of his folks, rather than mandating it, he said, hey, every day when you get up, turn on the news. If you see the boss wearing a tie, you need to wear one. And he was talking about the president. Right. And so I thought that was a novel way that was just consistent to say, look, this isn't just me. This is the way that life needs to be here because this is what the American people expect from us every day of the week. There's a lot of ways to handle compliance at a certain level, right? And I think when you start talking about how people dress at work, I use this example all the time. Go to RSA, right? You go walk around RSA and you see people with ties on and suits. Those are investment guys. They're looking to invest in companies and they want to walk around. You see guys that walk around like Dan Heidi, where he got his back around a pair of jeans and a shirt. Those are tech executives of some sort. And then everybody with hoodies and shirts on from the place, they're developers. They're the smart guys that are getting after it. And that tribal nature works for that event really well.
Right.
If I pull up to a booth and I want to ask them about the technology, I'm not finding the guy with the company polo shirt on. I think he's a sales guy.
Yeah.
Right? I want to know the tech piece. Let me go talk to one of the smart guys standing behind him. Right?
Yeah.
We get very tribal and we do things, but I some of it is credibility, right? We can argue whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying some of it is credibility. When you walk into a bank, you don't expect to see somebody with a tank top and shorts and flip flops on, right? And some of it is comfortability, right? We're like, okay, great, I know where I need to walk to, right?
Yeah.
In respect, right? When you walk into someplace, if everybody else is dressed a certain way, what value is it of you to fly so counter that you're a thing? Hey, I'm not talking about, hey, everybody's got a shirt and tie on, and I've got a suit with no tie, right? Because in today's world, nobody's really going to care about that. But if I show up dressed wildly inappropriate, right, then what am I telling everybody else? I don't value or respect their culture. And I think that's the issue.
Right, and I'm so self-centered that I'm going to make all of this about me. And I think part of it too, which is Dan, you and I have talked about this. I think part of this experiment that I'm really trying to pay attention to is forcing yourself to be aware of which tribe you're participating in any given moment, right? And so, like at the school Dan and I both came from, it's on the lower end of the university system in terms of its quality. I'm not talking bad about it. I'm just making an observation. It's really small. It doesn't have a lot of money. There's no endowment. And so the culture or the tribal aesthetic there is much more like a very early startup. And so if you show up there like in a really nice suit and tie, you're going to stand out, right? Whereas like at High Point, because it's much higher tier, right? Much higher tier. The population there expects a certain aesthetic so that you're part of that social structure.
Right. And I think there's value in that, right? It's anarchy model, right? There has to be some structure to what goes on, or it's just anarchy.
Well, the other part to that is, the folks that are really paying for the students to go there, when they show up, of the type of caliber of where they work, they want to see something as well.
Yep.
And if all the professors are wearing T-shirt and jeans and flip-flops, are they really going to cash out that $50,000 a year for their kid to go there? Probably not.
It's 55, bro. But you're exactly right, man. And that's what I'm trying to experiment with is where's that area where you fit in, like you're right on the line. You know what I mean? That's what I'm really interested in finding out. And how do you push it one way or the other? And just how do people react to it?
So on that line, where do you want to be? Do you go just below the line or do you go just above?
Right. Well, and
make sure you go just below as soon as you can. For me, I like to be just above.
Yeah,
when it comes to that.
Have you guys ever seen that video where there's two ants on a piece of paper and they keep drawing a little ink line and the ant gets confused and can't do it? That's what I imagine with Jason. He's running around doing his thing, and periodically the administration says, no, you can't do it. They draw a little line. He turns around and goes the other way, looking for another way to escape, and they draw another little line until they finally cut him into something.
Well, we could actually talk about this because it's interesting, man. What I'm trying to get after is how do people react in those subtle little variations in aesthetic? Because make no mistake, this campus is all about aesthetic. If you've ever looked at photos of it, it is immaculate, man. Immaculate. And it's built to be that way. It's engineered so that there's no distraction aesthetically, so you can focus on if you're a student learning, so forth and so on. And I don't want to disturb it for the sake of stirring a pot. I want to perturb it and see how people react to it.
Well, it's interesting overall, as you mentioned that, because, after getting back from essentially a week of being educated out there at Michigan, one of the classes was about brand marketing.
Yeah, exactly.
And the actual science behind building a brand and colors. So the funny thing is that purple tends to be done with innovation and creativity.
Listen, this is no joke, man. This is big time. I went into the brand new science building yesterday where all the biological sciences are, chemistry, botany, the classic, liberal arts sciences. Dude, this building is out of control good. They have their own planetarium in it. Nice, but this is the crazy stuff you find too. Check this out. And maybe we can move on. And so this building is top notch, gorgeous, man. There's office pods off hallways. And then the hallways themselves on both sides where all the classrooms and labs are, they're all glass. So you can see in, watch what everybody's doing. It's like walking through like the back sets of Disney World. Have you ever been there like on the Epcot tours? Dude, it is beautiful. And all the new buildings are like that. And you're walking around and you're like, okay, if you're choosing to show up every day, you're implicitly choosing to be part of that little tribe aesthetic culture, right? And you can't not do it. I mean, it's easier to choose not to show up. It's kind of like the social pressure, if that makes sense. It's
Sure.
really weird the way it works. It's really weird. In a good way, right? In a good way. But yeah, it's interesting.
I'll tell you another school that is, I had no preconceived notion of what it was going to look like or not. When I got there, it was amazingly how well the school is built, how well it's endowed. And again, those things, like when you get inside a building, what they've done is Emory down in Atlanta.
Oh yeah.
And I'm assuming it sounds from an endowment and tuition or base basis. It's about the same pricing thing as High Point. But it's a more geared towards health sciences because it sits right next to the Center for Disease Control, and we have an unbelievable physicians assistant program and all that stuff. And Jordan went down there for a basketball camp, and the facilities were just amazing. And the campus is in these rolling hills, and there's just construction and there's great things going on everywhere there. And if you look around, what I noticed is the people. Everybody's walking with their head up. They're out, like it's a very prideful sense, and that's the students and all the young folks there and everything. And it's a very positively charged energy there. And one of the things I like from like a camp perspective is a lot of times when they go to camp, even in periods where they're not going to be on the court or they're resting after meals and stuff like that, they're just left to their own devices. They have something for them to do every period that revolved, every one of those non-court periods that revolved around learning something about the school or higher education, right? They weren't there just to teach them basketball for 3 days. They brought in all the admissions coordinators and talked about what your high school transcripts look like and what's important to a university, right? And my daughter walked away kind of recharged for academics at a basketball camp, which I thought was amazing. The head basketball coach was young. I think she graduated from there as a player in 2013. So she's, 30, maybe 30, close. And she has an amazing message for young people, and she's full of energy and everything like that. And I thought her behavior in a very positive way kind of reflected what I was absorbing from being on that campus.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I went to University of Massachusetts was the exact opposite. It was built in an old textile town. We had to walk across the bridge in the Merrimack River. The student housing was 2 blocks away from public housing, and stuff like that. So, my experience, I walk onto these campuses of just this beautiful grandeur and architecture, amazing.
Yeah, dude, in this little social experiment I'm running, it's amazing how, like I was saying, just the aesthetic of the place really influences your behavior.
Yes. I think that's anywhere, right? You go to work every day. The light, one of the lights doesn't work. Things aren't, we kind of we come back to Silent Circle a lot, but that was a big thing every day. Kind of behind the scenes that we were always concerned about is, hey, number one, everything works correctly, right? That it doesn't, you don't get this flat tire feel of what's going on because everything functions correctly, but putting things in place, whether it's art or things on the walls, that let everybody know why we're here, but also celebrate what we've done in a positive fashion, and put the motivational string together. And things like colors are hugely important. There's a reason prisons are starting to paint their walls pink, right? Because that's psychology, and what that does to your emotions is a positive thing in that environment.
Right.
And so, branding and coloring is huge. In every business, how much time do you spend really contemplating your logos, right? And how many times and Dan is a little bit closer to this, how much money can you, I'm going to use the word waste because it can turn it out quickly, spending with ad agencies and marketing exams, okay, get rid of that line. Why? Somebody just tell me why. Other than the fact that, because it's not making a difference, right? And once you get there, and I think this is the important thing that we're trying to close this off, is once you've decided what your brand strategy is, what your marketing effort's going to be, that marketing effort and brand strategy you have to sell it internally before you sell it externally, because everybody has to live that, right? It's the reason that John Laguerre, even if he goes to Congress, which I think is wildly inappropriate, he wears a pink T-shirt, right? Because that's the brand. That's like every waking minute you see is that pink T-Mobile brand, right? You want everybody globally to know it. And that shade of pink, even if it doesn't have a big T in the corner of that thing, you know it's a T-Mobile thing. He wins, right? That brand wins. And I think that's what you're talking about education. They want a certain brand to the education and what you're getting there. And so is Dan's correct, because parents are shelling out more than a little bit of money to have their kids go there. And that's what they expect. And the customer's right.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, anybody that I would say reasonable and mentally stable wants to belong to the best tribe as you can perceive it, given your frame of reference. And how do you distinguish between various tribes to make a choice? Like if you're a senior or a junior in high school, you got to choose a university if that's what your path is.
Right. I do belong to the best tribe.
I thought you said best.
Man.
It's the amount of science that goes when you're, as you were mentioning, in terms of the brand building. It is first inward, because no matter I love it when companies say, "Hey, we're going to be innovative." Just saying it isn't enough, right? It's a way in which you have to think. Like part of it, people don't look at Starbucks when they were really starting to branch out. Forget about what they've added in the technology. But many people associate innovation with technology, and it's not. It's how it makes you feel. It's the experience, because that experience is what has people in a perception mapping believing that it's okay to pay $6 for a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. Their quality of the coffee at Starbucks is on par with Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's. Yet the experience of being in that cafe is what winds up making people want to spend $6 for that coffee. That didn't happen overnight.
So let me ask you a question on that note. This is interesting. I just thought of this. What's your reaction to if I claimed that one of the reasons why Apple has lost their appeal as innovators is because they haven't changed their actual aesthetic of their devices? Like they've been pretty identical for a number of generations now. And so like even the switch to no headphone jack to USB-C or Lightning or Thunderbolt actually proves to be correct, right? Everybody now is switching to it, and it's much more popular. But it seems like the public shift or the public perception of them, Apple, as being innovators in tech is kind of falling away. And I wonder, based on what we're saying, if that's because their aesthetic's not changing.
Well, actually, I think the reason why, so from my perspective, is why Apple has not been an innovator in many, many years, in that they used to be very much, we are the anti-Big Blue. We are the anti-Microsoft. We are the people that are different, that we are the creativity, and that aesthetic that they had was, I think, is fine, but they've stopped, right? After the iPhone came out, what have they really done to be a disruptor? Because that's really what they were. They were disruptors in an industry. That stopped. While Tim Cook is, I think, a very fine CEO for operational company, they haven't pushed the needle anymore. That has stopped. Now, we don't know what's going to happen later, but everything's been an iteration off of their iPod. They went iPod, iPod Touch, iPhone, iWatch. It's just been iterative.
And they all look the same, right? Right. I mean, real physical difference other than like screen size.
And they go so far out of what now people are expecting, because now they have a cult following. So like for me, I like the Mac product, but I can't use it because I'm not carrying two devices. I got a phone and I've got my Surface. If Mac actually had, and the iPad Pro sucks for me in business. For me to do stuff with business, it sucks. It's a horrible product. It's an iPad. It's just a touchscreen iPad. I can't do what I need to from a business perspective. And still utilizing virtual desktop infrastructure off an iPad is horrendous because of the mouse connection through the iPad to your Citrix environment or VMware environment. It doesn't work. I get it better off of a Chromebook. in that experience because I can still VDI. So they've lost those things. They're always constantly saying, like, they were the last to implement a fingerprint ID. They were the last to implement the camera for facial recognition to get in there. They still don't. I mean, their iPad Pro was their answer to like the Surface, but it doesn't do enough. They go so far as to say, well, we're not going to implement the technology until we say it's good enough. Well, that's also because they're trying to maximize the profit. They're waiting for the fingerprints and the cameras to come down in price enough to where then it makes it worth their while. So I think I would rather, and that was the big thing, is that Apple was expensive. Their brand was unique. We paid for that. We paid for the difference. And now I don't think we're getting that as a community any longer. They're leaving that innovation up to others. But that's just my opinion.
I don't disagree with any of that, but I'd say this. The global, at some point, when they first came out, when the iPhone first came out, and then the following year, the G1 first came out and started this battle, right? The iPhone wouldn't be where it is today without Android, and Android wouldn't be where it is today without Apple, right? Those in that innovation. But how much real innovation can we do now on a telephone, on a smartphone, right? And how do we know that we've kind of gotten to a tipping point where innovation isn't going to really, we're going to make incremental little changes. Like I said, we're going to have 4 cameras on the phone instead of 3. I agree that I don't know why they're holding on to Lightning. Get the USB-C on there, and now, because every computer you buy from Apple, everything is USB-C, as it should be,
including the iPad Pro.
Yeah, yes. Including the iPad Pro. Yeah. So you would hope that this next generation of phone is going to have USB-C, but are and when are they going to let that go? Everything now, and it's one of the big reasons that Microsoft is having a renaissance. They understand content delivery, right? In that content curation and content delivery is huge. They understand it for the enterprise in a way that few other people do, because that's been their focus. They've given up on, hey, we're going to create a marriage with Samsung for the Galaxy S10 or 20 or whatever the latest one's coming out for all of our products, and effectively, if not in actuality, kind of create a little, its own space for Microsoft on that Samsung phone, and that'll be able to curate, content with OneDrive and keep everything kind of iCloud. And that's one of the big reasons people, whether they think they're innovative or not, still spend so much time with Apple is, hey, if I take a picture, it ends up on all my devices, I don't have to worry about it.
Yep. Here's the number one reason why Apple is no longer the innovative brand that they used to be. Because grandmom can use it.
Right.
That is completely contrary to what their brand was. They've lost that vision. People like you, TK, as old as you are, can use an iPad and can use an iPhone.
Here's the thing. But if we look at the population, how population skews right now, the largest, we're coming up to have to deal with in a number of ways, probably a crisis of certain level with baby boomers retiring.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And they should be able. Grandparents want to talk to their kids, and so you have to make it user friendly. And I think that's the promise of technology, right? That's always been the hope and promise of technology, that we're going to get to a point where every man can use it, right? When I say put the every man, I don't mean gender role, but that statement of the everyman, right? And that everyone has the ability to use this technology, and that's what makes great technology, is that the hard stuff is in the background, right? That I should be able to pop up and my grandkids, the grandkids should be able to talk to grandparents just by turning on FaceTime or whatever chat app that you want to use. But and we've talked before, I have a OnePlus, the OnePlus 7 Pro. That is a badass to the bone phone, right? Completely and utterly, amazing device. It's so amazing that I would wait probably, if I was a full-time Android user, I would probably wait past the OnePlus 8 and then go, I'm going to grab the OnePlus 9 when it comes out, because they're making leaps and bounds that quickly. I think I have a friend that's got the 6T or the 6P, whatever it was called, the previous version. And even there, they made such leaps and bounds, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to tell you, Dan, you brought me back do you remember the original Apple ad in the mid '80s? Where
Yeah.
it's like the sterile dystopian room, and the people are watching the big head on the screen, and that lady runs in with the big hammer and smashes it. That
1984.
single-handedly got me into computing. Single-handedly.
Right. It was they built a brand. And you know, and Steve Jobs was a master at that. And like, and not that Tim Cook's bad. I mean, he's a really good CEO, right? He's an operational CEO, and I wouldn't say he's taken Apple to the next level like Satya has with Microsoft, but Tim Cook is a good CEO, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't. I feel Apple has lost their innovative society that they had built.
Well, let's look at it this way. If we just compare,
I'm not talking about just the iPhone. I'm talking about the brand of Apple.
right. If we compare Apple to Microsoft, and we kind of a trajectory, right? I had a question. Somebody asked me a question this week. It's a great question. What's the difference between fixing a business and building a business? Right? What do you like more? Right? If you look,
Fixing.
What's that?
Fixing.
Right. Yeah.
That's my preference.
It's easy because you have a lot more data to help you move the ball left to right or where it needs to go than you do from building. There's a lot of innovation. There's a big piece of white paper that getting the first word of the book done is the hardest, right?
It is, yeah, right.
The rest of it is like, now I can start crap spewing out of my head into the place and we can fix it from there, right? So when Steve Jobs passed away, right, some of that culture passed away with it, right? Because the allowances he made for certain folks in the industry or in that business unit to be innovative and really go crazy were epic, right? Jason Cooper, our friend Jason, one week when we were at Blackbird, he went to Google, and then the next day he went to Apple. And he said Google was like going to a kindergarten class with big relevant colors and everybody's thing. And he goes, and Apple was going to a business. People had their heads down and they were working. This is before Steve Jobs passed away, right? He didn't go to the innovation center, right? He went to the business of Apple, right? So that when he passes away, the number 2 guy was Cook. And you're right, he was a great operational leader of that thing. How do I translate the vision and all the emotion and everything else that Steve Jobs brings to the business that's made it fantastic and great and on par with businesses we've never seen? How do I translate that into action that protects shareholder value but allows us to innovate? And he was great at that, right? On the other hand, you had Windows running around like they lost their head, right? We're going to do mobile phones. We're going to do this. We're going to try that. We're going to do this. And they started to lose their way with business, right? And so the Oracles, the Amazons, everybody started to creep in and say, hey, while they're not really paying attention to business, we're going to come and give business a big wet kiss on the mouth and a hug, right? When Satya took over, he said, what do we need to be good at? And where's the 21st century? And his machines, right, the Microsoft machines, and if you notice, the first thing they did was they got back into making computers. They were a hard software company. They just used to sell to Dell, IBM, Lenovo, anybody that wanted to buy their software and put it on a computer. And they had all of the tools to be able to get it onto that machine and function correctly at a very high level, from servers to everything else, right? They got back to that. But more importantly, they created their own innovation center by making Microsoft tablets, by making Microsoft computers, and said, here's the gold standard. And by the way, we understand content delivery, curation, security, how in a remote environment you grab the data and use it to advance your business is key. And we understand that if we make a cloud environment, we can make it to tweak it, right? How much, you look at the federal government, why is there such a big argument over the JEDI project? Why? Because Microsoft has had the dominant key to the store for how many years? And now that's being challenged, right? And we can argue whether we think one company having all the cloud or, blah, blah, all that, what congressmen are going to argue about in districts that are, the congressmen in Washington are going to argue with the congressmen in Washington because they're all from the same place, right? And who gets that thing. But at the end of it, and young Mr. Stone was correct. He goes, hey, it doesn't matter where your data is at, right? Because when we first started talking about hybrid networks in 2014-ish, a hybrid network was, hey, I've got stuff on a terrestrial server and it's got to go out to the cloud. Now I've got to interconnect between an AWS environment, between an Azure environment, between an Oracle environment, or somebody's private cloud environment, right? And it should be seamless, right? And there's money for third-party vendors in the cracks to make those interconnects and everything. And that's what makes technology exciting, is I don't have to build everything, right? And the companies that say, hey, if it's not built here, we're not going to win, go out of business, right? Dan, you and I what were you arguing about at Silent Circle one time about building an API kit to dovetail into Active Directory from our management tool? We're in DC. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting somebody who builds really cool APIs for Microsoft. Why? Because the US government's there and they use Microsoft. Why in God's name am I going to try to build one myself? Be very good at defining
because our initials aren't TC.
Well, but I mean that is an indicator for business around the globe, right?
Okay.
And with that, that's where Microsoft really they said, what is our core business? What do we do well? And what do our customers expect from us that we haven't been doing in the past? And more importantly, how can we lead them to the future by showing the path, right? And can you do cloud computing securely, right? Google's doing some really good work, right? And when we talk about Google, we're not talking about consumer Google. We're talking about enterprise Google in a way that things get managed on there. And I think Dan correctly says, I don't care what you're using, but just pick one and don't go off and do some weird third party thing, right? And stick to that, because you're going to get traction with that. I mean, Dan, in your environment, how many people actually fully download all the Windows apps, all the Microsoft Office apps onto their machine? Or does everybody just work in the browser now and do it virtually, and everything's basically up in their OneDrive account? So no matter where they're at, and that's another thing, the use of OneDrive within the Microsoft environment has taken away some of the steam of iCloud and what that was.
So, in the environment today, there's still an awful lot of, so the one application where Microsoft fails in the browser is Microsoft Excel. It does not have all of, not even close to the functionality in the browser. What's funny is that the Microsoft Office for mobile devices, Excel, is more powerful than the browser-based version. So that I don't quite understand that, but it's true. But the issue in my environment is that while OneDrive is difficult for many applications, because in the financial services world, there are still applications that actually have to write to a network file share. And OneDrive does not provide that UUID in order to be able to write to it. So not a great example. However, in my world, it's about 50-50 that are using browser versus others, because my tellers, so to speak, I don't really give them access to anything. So the footprint of their device is all browser based. They can open Outlook in the web. They can do Word, Excel, all that stuff in the web, because they're really just viewing, or they're doing simple things. Yeah. The other 50%, the back office folks and those that are in sales and all that kind of jazz, it's full basically the full Microsoft suite from Office 365. So it's 50-50 today.
Okay.
But there's some limitations. Now, funny enough, some of the banks that have actually gone to Google don't have this problem. Google Drive, you can actually map to. And then the other part is, if you wanted to open a Microsoft Office document from a network file share, you can't do it. If you use Google, you can. So those banks that have gone Google actually have a much easier time with all of this, because the browser version of Google Sheets, it kicks ass. It's just like using Microsoft Excel on your desktop.
Yep. Well, we're just having this conversation as a new department about what do we standardize on? Because not only should we standardize for ourselves, but we have a growing student population that we want to impart the sense of standards and sense of consistency on. And so I started this conversation like you're talking about with, well, wait, we can all agree that we have different preferences as individuals, but that's not the point. The point is we have to integrate with people. So what is everybody else using? And so that's how we've started our selection process of our, because the school provides, I mean, we by default get like a 1 terabyte OneDrive allocation per person. Huge for us. So do we use Office 365, which you would get for free, and the client apps and OneDrive, and incur some of that overhead like you were talking about? Or do we roll our own tools?
No.
Not smart. Not smart.
No.
It's an option, but no.
Yeah. Bad
Or
option.
do we use
an option?
Yeah. I mean,
Hard pass.
well, let's be intellectually honest and list it, but we're just going to put it way down at the bottom and pretend like it doesn't exist. Yeah.
In two,
or we can do
fonts, so it looks like an eye chart. That was one of our options.
That's right. Or do we use Google? And that's kind of where we're at now. Even down to the point where we're talking about what do we do for like essentially a departmental wiki. So not only can we document what we're doing as individuals for courses, but we can document how we integrate with IT across campus, which is problematic, other schools across the university, so forth and so on. And well, me and the other new guy were like, wait a minute, we get Microsoft Teams and it's a SharePoint backend. It's beautiful. It works great. So why do you want to install a wiki by itself and try to rebuild what's already been provided? At least let's try it.
Here's the novel idea. What do most kids come out of high school using these days? Google for Education.
Yeah.
And so, it's not hard cognitive overhead. These kids are smart and they'll figure it out, right? But the seamless transition is to go from Google for Education, and we're talking at I think I'd have to think, but I think the K-8 school my daughter went to, they're at the fourth or fifth grade level. They're getting Chromebooks now.
Right? Yeah, that's what I would guess usually.
And so there's even now on my little one has one of the old MacBooks in the house that's hooked up to a big monitor, and when she gets on it, I mean, she's right to Chrome, right to her Google for Education account. She's out there working, right? And I do think that for ease of use, especially in education now, there's because of Hangouts, because of chat, because of all the enterprise type tools, that for all the back end stuff that's still not completely seamless on Microsoft. I think Google's just what a great little option.
Yeah,
it is. I think where Google fails today is not having a very, or I would say an equivalent to SharePoint.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sites doesn't get it. Sites doesn't get it. I mean, there's but like I said, they ended Hangouts on air. Why? Because they're probably working on something else right now. And I think that they are acutely focused on enterprise in a way that they've never probably is moving from a data aggregator and a data sales company into being the tool of choice for enterprise, which was why they ostensibly have a completely different network for their enterprise customers as opposed to their consumer customers, is because they understand the reputational hit they would take, and how and if I'm in the Microsoft marketing department, that's like happy days. I'm driving my car 3 feet off the ground. They have a big mistake because something like superimposed on what people would view a consumer commodity giveaway of data, right? I mean, I couldn't drive my car into the building fast enough that morning to get working on wearing them out, right? So I think they're very thing. And I say this to people all the time, and I use you. I said, hey, I got a friend of mine, the CIO at a bank, and he said, I don't care whether you use Google or Microsoft, just pick one. And go with it. Don't do weirdo stuff on your own.
Right.
I mean, you have to set the standard, whatever that standard's going to be. It doesn't really matter. And then you're always going to have the one-offs, which are going to fill in a gap. So whether it's Microsoft has gaps, and so does Google. You name it, they all have a gap, right? And the biggest part is, like, when you start off, you don't really know exactly everything you need, which is why if you're a Microsoft shop, it's easy to get into either ERP or CRM by just using Microsoft Dynamics. Is it great? I'd say no. I'd say it's okay. But until you really know what you need, then you might say, okay, I need to go Oracle, or I need to go SAP, or I need Salesforce. But until you know.
Right. But, and also, if I'm using Microsoft Dynamics and I'm in a Microsoft environment, I don't have to have the overhead of people and time and money to start to slowly migrate into that and kind of stick my toe in the water. If I go SAP, I've effectively got to hire a shadow executive team to do the shadow executive stuff while the real team is out there building that ERP system to the function that we need it. And then it can become chaos, especially if you're not fully aware of what you want and why.
Absolutely. Right. Very true. And this is where I tell organizations that are looking at that, until you're close to about 2,000 employees, that's the time when you start thinking about, what am I going to change from Microsoft? I'm going to go from the CRM to Salesforce. I'm going to go ERP to Oracle or wherever. Not both. Pick one.
Right.
Just one. Because it's a 2-year project.
Yeah.
And anyone that tells you it's not a 2-year project is a salesperson, and they're lying.
Yeah. There's a road that's littered with VPs of operations from just dying on the street trying to implement ERP into big companies, right?
Right. And there's a reason why going with a new CRM or ERP is a number one reason why CIOs change jobs. Because if they sold it correctly, then it was a 2-year project. After the end of that 2 years, they just proved they could do it, and then they go get a new job. Those CIOs that believe that it's the salespeople, and this is a 12 to 18 months, they got fired, and they're looking for another job. So one way or another, those are the reasons.
I've seen it wreck people now. When I was at the restaurant company, before I went into academia full-time, check this out. We built the company right when I started was building a new distribution center. So this is where they would get all the fast food products in, and they would ship them out to all the stores, corporate and franchise, okay? And so when I started, they were building that, and they closed the one we had and moved into the new one. Like, this is year 1 when I was there. It took them so long, and they never completed the PeopleSoft migrate, because we had PeopleSoft with the whole PeopleSoft development team, and they were getting the module add-on for the distribution management. So like all the truck route management, the labor management, the inventory management for a distribution center. That went so south because of what Dan is saying, that it wasn't finished, not only by the time I left, but 2 years later when they sold the company, it still wasn't done. So they had to sell the distribution center first to somebody else to get it off the books because it was a black hole for money. And then they could sell the company.
Yikes.
It was a disaster, dude. A disaster. Simply because somebody thought, hey, I can get this done in 6 months. No.
That's one of those things where, the board just needs to start looking at the CEO and goes, hey, look, at some point, put the shovel down and get your, and stop shoveling money into it.
Yeah, right. Well, like that's the number one rule in life, common sense. Wouldn't you agree? When you're in a hole, and as soon as you realize it, stop digging immediately.
Right.
And that's the other part with these things that people don't understand, that you're going to have to add somewhere between 8 to 12% staff the moment you decide you're going to do this.
Yes.
Because those people are going to backfill those that are currently in operations, and those that are in operations are going to do the job of migrating.
Right.
And that's they don't want to hear that part of it. Now, because the goal is I've got to get my return on assets to be higher. And so if that's going to happen, I'm going to invest X amount of money in migrating from one system to the other. I'm doing it because I feel like my data is going to be more valuable. I'm going to make better business decisions. And therefore, my revenue, the top end, needs to get higher. And if it doesn't, then there's a problem.
Right.
And so in order for that to happen, I have to increase my staff because my return on the revenue generated per employee has to be higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
When people talk about this, there's that fantasy, right? Because when those 12 people, you're saying, hey, I got to replace my operations staff, right? How many of those people are minimum wage employees? None. Right? They're all in the top half to top 1% of the employees that you're working there, right? And what's the time to give a minimum amount of training to the people, to the shadow staff that's showing up for a while, to say that you can function enough during a day to leave the actual staff alone to build that ERP system?
3 months. 3 months.
But that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's everything is at a deficit when you go on this, right? And I know some of the providers are, and contractors, they're really trying to say, how can we do this with the least, what can we front load and then start filling in the shell, right?
Right.
But like you said, you get to 2,000 employees. It's not a little bit of data moving around daily. Plus, in the bank, all of the data going from one place to another to reconcile accounts. And I take money out from an ATM in Indonesia, and it's got to be reconciled with the credit union pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right? And how do we do that? And so those are just some behemoth tasks that, which is why I think people go to somebody like a Salesforce, right, for CRM, because they're like, okay, this will be the 99-cent solution. But it's also why Salesforce has recognized that, hey, if we get installed early, because you can call it snobbiness or whatever, but there's a lot of really kick-ass salespeople, especially in tech sales, that if you don't use Salesforce as your CRM tool, they won't come work for you because they understand the cost associated with deploying Salesforce. Like, if you don't have the resource to do that, how are you going to have the resource to pay us, innovate, and do everything else? We can talk about the logic of that argument one way or the other, but that's a truism.
Well, the Force.com platform in general is amazing, right? And you don't have to go full in. Like, there's the general aspect from a sales organization just using Salesforce, but that's just the tip, right? That's the smallest amount of what Salesforce does. I mean, I can do loan originations. There's so much that I can get, and Salesforce is really putting a lot of money into that. But what people don't realize is it is a behemoth, and out of the box, you get nothing.
Right.
You got to build it. So.
But that's okay. So that goes back to the bigger problem. Whether it's ERP or whether it's deploying a Microsoft Dynamics ERP or Oracle or Salesforce or anything else, or getting an API kit built to dovetail your back end into Active Directory, right? Or to get it to use the API to pull from the SAML database or however you want to do that. It all starts with the requirement. Right. And the bigger problem with the people that exist in a segment of an industry or in a team is they're like, all right, where Salesforce is coming in, let's deploy it. And they don't define a really tight requirement. And more importantly, they don't allocate the money for, okay, we've defined the requirement, we deploy it. Now you're going to have the same people that built it for more than a little bit of money come back and tweak it. Because what's the number one reason people bitch about ERP and CRM tool? It's not usable in our business. Okay, great. We didn't think that fully through. That's the first thing I hear when somebody says that. Because we just didn't think fully through everything. So in Salesforce, for example, I can make certain buttons a requirement. Like certain fields have to be filled in certain buttons. Well, if I'm selling something, do I have to have the ITAR compliance filled in for a U.S. company that I'm sending it into the U.S.?
Probably.
Well, most likely not.
Oh, for ITAR? I thought you had. Well, it's not a weapon, so.
Right. Well, but encryption, certain types of encryption fall under ITAR, right?
Yeah.
It becomes a catch-all, right? But what do I make that's required that stops the process, right? Hey, did I pay for the full integration so my email can be fully integrated inside Salesforce? So the only tool I open up in the morning is Salesforce, right? What are we using to get the leads in, and how do they process, and how does that all go back, right? A lot of times people say, oh, this tool sucks or that tool sucks. The tool doesn't suck. What you asked it to do sucked because either you were not fully aware of the powerfulness or the nature of the full extent you could exploit that tool, or you just don't know how to write a requirement.
Right. Well, yes. And I would agree. That's really where it starts. Like, I'll give you there's interesting overlaps, even though my role in academia is different than administration, which is closer to what you guys are talking about. We have the same concerns. Like, my colleague and I got on a grant, and this is running out of the Mayo Clinic. So it's a big deal. And they contacted us as a computer science department to build a web app for them so that they could collect participant data for their research and manage it themselves. And there's just some customization why they want it. It's actually a really simple task, as long as you capture the requirements correctly. And so we asked them, well, what exactly do you want this thing to do, and how do you want it to work, and what do you want it to look like? And they're layman scientists relative to computer science, right? And so they had this note in their statement of work, and it said, deploy review, redesign. And my colleague and I were like, yo, that's wrong. We're going to do an alpha. You're all going to sign off on it per the business requirements we collect from you. Once that's built, then we'll go to beta. And that's just to make sure it works correctly and doesn't blow up. And then it'll be in production, not production and then redesign. You got it backwards, son. Backwards. But it all starts with requirements.
Always starts with requirements.
You give them a bad requirement, you're going to get a bad result.
Well, like here's a really detailed example. They have 105 data fields. These are input fields that somebody has to put data into to complete an entry into the research. Okay. Well, listen, man, I can copy and paste and create you a single page web app that's 100 fields long if you want to scroll all day. I don't care if that's what you want. Or do you want it partitioned into segments so that when you complete a section, depending on your last answer, it has a workflow to go to the next section? That might be a little more usable.
Right.
Right. You tell me what you want. You're the business.
Well, that's, there's the old adage, there's what I say and there's what you hear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Words matter, and being explicit in nature so that somebody, the leader, that somebody can't parse it to go do something else and say, well, that's what you said. And then you got to go, yeah, you're right. I did that. Yep, that's me. Don't do that in the future. Do it this other way, right? Because you weren't explicit enough in your intent, right? I think really when you talk about design projects of any style, you're saying I want to translate intent to action, and what's the shortest path to translate that intent to action?
Right. Man, we didn't even get to what we said we were going to talk about.
We hardly ever do.
This was a really good. I like this topic though, man, because it's so interesting because it can be specific about specific technologies, but it's more general. Yeah, and I sit here and I think about the overlap. Like, before I think Dan, we were talking about Tiki. I think you were on the show that time about how you, Dan, keep a personal CRM to manage all your relationships.
Yep.
And I took that as a pro tip, and I've started to do it. Just because I realized the importance, particularly with the path I'm on, of having a lot of hands-on time with students.
Well, you never know. You never know what's going to come out. First part is like you download all your LinkedIn data, and then I basically put it out into a mind map. Right? You start seeing all the relationships that happen, and then certain skill sets, things to do. Like I've got so many people on LinkedIn I basically met at a conference. I have no idea who this person really is, but it's fine because it's from some type of aspect in sales. So that's fine. But I note that. I'm like, no interactions. But when I have an interaction, I tend to go back to it and put in some notes.
Well, I'll give you another practical example of how your pro tip I've put into action, and it's of immediate benefit. So we're on this grant, and a huge part of the grant, because it's National Science Foundation, is including students and paying them to do work. And so for us, we're actually going to bring students in and develop the project to us, leading them per the specifications and requirements, right? Well, how do you pick students? And so what I quickly figured out was either I can front load the effort, which minimizes it, and keeping like a little CRM system or the old fashioned Rolodex analog, right? I'm doing the digital version of that. With this student has this expertise, they've had these types of grades and successes on these types of projects and classes. And that's a corollary for the type of work that I think this is going to need. And so instead of going and getting all the students together and asking them if they want to be involved, which is a nightmare, right? I can actually look it up and be like, oh, I've talked to this person about this type of technology. I know they know it. And it just shortcuts that whole interaction.
So what I've started doing with that is I've started now to also put attributes to people, like you just mentioned, and have been running it through some data analytics to predict whether or not someone is going to be able to do a particular type of job.
What do you got? What do you got in your entry for me?
What's that?
What do you
for
have?
You? I can't tell you. It's classified. But there's I have found a different indicator that has proven right now. And it really started off with Mika, right? Mm-hmm. So as part of that, like we talk about, there's an aspect of if you played an organized team sport, there's an indicator where you're probably going to do well if you had that discipline because you know how to work in a team. But what I've also found, and it's proving out here a second time, someone that has stopped doing something along the lines of like modern dance, ballet, which is what Mika was. So the reason why, not only was she already smart, that aspect of needing that discipline of having to train all the time, when that stopped, she transitioned that into cyber and has done quite well.
Yep.
Well, I've got another young intern that same thing. And that they just had them give a presentation to all of the executives, including my boss. And at the end of it, well, first he had said this was done so well because I had them do a pen test. Because this was done so well, it was easily understandable. You identified everything and you talked perfect. And this was better than a professional pen testing company that's come in and done this. Would you give this same presentation to our board? Perfect. And at the end, after they left, my CEO goes, "Is that the one you want to bring on full time?" And I'm like, "Yes." He goes, "Where do I sign?" All right, that discipline. There's an indicator that if they did something like this and they're out of that, if you can see that they're going to put that same effort into what they did at that high level where they were at, it's a pretty strong indicator that even if they don't have all of the skills, they're probably going to get them very quickly.
You know, I had a CEO of a company ask me, and I was getting ready to speak, and he was trying to throw me off my game a little bit, which is not going to happen because he's not that smart. And
does he think he's me?
What's that?
Does he think he's me?
He thought he was you for a second, Dan.
Often imitated, never duplicated.
Thank goodness. But it was I'd never heard the question before. I never thought about it before. And I just basically said, "Hey, let me get through my talking piece, and then maybe I'll answer the question for you along the way." And his question was, "Hey, anytime I hear about SEALs in business, they're always doing C-level things, they're always growing, they're doing things." And really what it comes down to is that thing. Like most guys, I think guys, they might not have all the skills when they get out. You know, they've got it educated, that kind of thing. But they might not have 5, 10, 15 years of practical experience to jump into the level of leadership that they want. Well, what's the big winner? They're disciplined, right? That's number one, but it goes deeper than that. We always say, what are SEALs good at? We're experts at becoming experts, right? And you translate that discipline into something actionable. Like, hey, I don't know everything I'm supposed to know. I'm going to stay up until I get the functional knowledge to be there, right? And it's for us, it starts like your first day when you get there. They're like, "Hey, you're the engineering rep." Well, I don't know everything about doing that, and I don't want to embarrass myself in front of my peers, right? It's nothing in a 20-year SEAL career is about being told you've done a good job. It's about defending your position against your peers and being thought of as a competent member of that group, right? And it starts in buzz because we everything we do gets graded as a team. You have individual skills that you're expected to have a minimum competency at, running, swimming, mostly in buzz, it's all physical stuff. But everything you do where you get graded either positively or negatively is done as a team. And so part of that is understanding it's the whole purpose that when you see in Bud, you have 6 guys that are holding up the boat, right? There would be 7, but the officer's in the back hanging out, wasting everybody's time, right? He's yelling go while everybody else is going, right? And I'm joking around, but I hope one of these guys is watching. But with 6 guys doing everything they're supposed to do, meeting the minimum requirement for success and not embarrass themselves with their peers, that works fine. As people start to peel away, you'll see the guy doing log PT. It's the same way. Individual pieces of that log are pretty light. The whole log is unsustainable for 1 or 2 people. Well, as long as everybody's doing their job and meeting the minimum standard of success, the whole group is wildly successful and can accomplish things that can't be accomplished anywhere else. That when we start translating that into the rest of the world, I think that is why team guys are successful, got former athletes. Even in Buzz, like we'd be there and watch things, and one of my buddies and I could sit there and watch and go, that guy ran cross country. Because when things got really tough, and there's a value in this as well. He basically turned into himself, right? Because when you're out running, you've got to go, hey, I need to get faster. I need to think I'm feeling badly about myself. You've got to, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, your own jock strap, whatever it is you're pulling up, and have intrinsically in you to do that. As a group dynamic, when good team members are really high functioning, when they're functioning really highly, they're looking around for other people to help. When they're hurting, they have an expectation of people going to help them because that's what they grew up with. Right? It's the person falls down on the field or on the court, and the rest of the team walks over to pick them up. Right? That's the ultimate metaphor, and it's why coaches, in my mind, should be so adamant about that. Right? It's a slap on the butt whether you make a free throw or not. Right? It's like, hey, we know you're out there doing your best, and we understand that nobody's perfect, but get in there and keep doing it. Right? That, and hiring people to fit that mold is becoming more and more prevalent. Right? So it's like, I think there are certain places where you need to have a certain level of education to be successful. I think the rest of it is down to a minimum knowledge base and a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
Right? And understanding that you're not the center of the universe, right? And that when you need help, you need to ask. When you can provide help, you need to run in the middle of the room and do that. All right. I mean, I think every business that's successful has a certain level of that in their minds, because I also think that any other style of leadership wears out after about two years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If not sooner today.
What's that?
If not sooner, depending on the type of company.
I think you'll start to see the cracks in the road in about 14 to 16 months, but you can just watch the train right off the tracks, and it's multiple. And every time I talk to somebody, they're like, "Hey, this is the other." I go, "How's your CEO behave?" Right? How's it? Because I don't have to ask everybody else. How does the CEO behave towards the rest of the C-level? And then that all filters downhill.
Yep.
Right? And usually it's somebody making it about themselves.
The fish rots from the head.
Yeah, and that's like I said, you're really smart at this stuff. That's just not that hard. People just don't think about it, right? And a lot of leadership's not complicated. It's just hard, right? Because at the core of it, what do you have? You have to do everything you tell other people to do, and then walk the standard.
Yeah.
Right? If you do that, leadership's easy. But guess what? When you don't want to show up early, when you don't want to leave late, when you don't want to make the hard decision whether somebody stays or goes, or that even a little thing like, hey, you need to wear ties. Right? Why? Because there's a certain professional demeanor we're trying to create, and that's what we want to create. Right? What's the tribe going to look like? Well, if you self-select and say, I want to be a leader, right? Because that's what nobody's forcing you to show up at a company and say, hey, I want to be the CEO or the CEO or the CEO. Everybody self-selects into what they want to do. If you want to do that, you can't look at the leadership piece as bad. You have to love it, relish it, and show up every day and say, I don't have to know everything technically, but you know what I do? I have to know the people that work for me. I have to love them, right? And I have to put them in the best position to be successful, right? And trusting them, right? As well, we all think the same way. People either start out as a 4.0 and they work their way down, or they start out as a 0 and they got to work their way up to 4.0, right? The 0 to 4.0 never work, and that usually is evident or prevalent in abusive styles of leadership.
Yeah.
Right. You're here because I thought I could make you better. Not, hey, I don't know everything, and I'm trying to surround myself with the smartest. It's like IP, right? You get a base patent. That's the really good stuff. And then what do you want to do? I want to surround myself with really good perimeter patents. Why? Because just because I'm the boss doesn't mean I know everything. I need a lot of smart people around me, not to defend me, but to defend the actions of the business so that we can all be better.
Right. Well, it's very analogous to, I'm sure at one point in all of our lives, we've been in those types of intimate relationships where somebody has the fantasy that they can change the other person, or they're magically going to change on their own. And you lose track of the fact that, at least for me, what I've realized at this point in my life is it's really about just showing up and being consistent with yourself and authentic, and allowing the other person to be the same. And you strengthen the commonalities and you try to minimize the weaknesses, and you're just winning together at life as best as you can.
But that's the old Sybil theory, right? If you're difficult to deal with in a certain way every day of the week, I can show up and I can work with you because I know what I'm getting into every day of the week. And if you're senior to me, then I've got to figure out a way to manage my emotions within that difficulty. Right? Or if you're a great guy to work for and we think, okay, I'm going to want to work harder for you because I know you're working hard for me, that kind of theory. Well, in between, where it's the pendulum swing. You don't know whether you're going to get yelled at or hugged when you walk into the office. That's what makes people go apoplectic and leave.
Yep.
Very true. All right, my friends.
That's a
Gotta
beautiful
get out
show.
of
Yeah, it was as always, it was great. 138 in the books, right?
here.
Yeah, there you go. That's done, guys. So if you're good, we'll do it again next Saturday.
Yeah,
Are you good with 8 or 9? What works better?
I'm either way.
Yeah, I'm good with either.
I like 9 because it allows me to get up and go run and
Okay.
all that jazz. So
Yeah, it's easy.
sweet.
Well, you can always do one of these. You should be able to do one of these shows while running.
I got the setup now. Oh, dude, I got my new headlamp. If you thought I was a dwarf before, now I'm running with my dwarf light, man. I got this high-end head beam.
The clothesline, so your phone hangs down in front of your head. We'll get a little shot. We'll over-engineer the daylights out of it, and it'll be good.
Then all of a sudden you'll have like neck muscles like this.
14 grand later, we'll have something that we could have bought for $49 on Amazon.
You'll have like the neck of Brock Lesnar, but the body of Luigi.
Hey, I'm still handsome.
Rakishly handsome.
All right, guys. Have a good weekend. Always a pleasure. Cheers.
Judge.